welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. You know, follow me on Twitter. And it's Monday, August 26th, and we'll be taking a look at tonight's 6-game MLB DFS slate on DraftKings. So hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. Give me those thummy thumbs. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Remember, later tonight, we'll have Grinders Live, 5 p.m. Eastern with Dean and the guys, followed by Crunch Time with Kevin Ruff, giving you all the weather updates that we'll need on this slate, I think. We got some problems maybe in Boston, maybe in Minnesota, so definitely check that out later today. But joining me, as always, on Mondays, it's Mondays with McCool. James McCool, co-author with me of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you can pick up at theoryofdfs.com. We're a week away from a week and a half from NFL season, but we still got baseball. Still got baseball going on. So let's get into it. Pitching on tonight's slate. Basically, it's a core slate. We got the Rockies and the Marlins in cores, and then a bunch of other teams. We're going to act as if there's no weather problems. In Minnesota, there may be an issue in Minnesota. Roth doesn't think there'll be an issue in Boston, so we're just going to treat it like a 6-game slate. It's weird for me to say. Okay, let's. There's an inflection point on the slate on who you play at pitcher. But let's start with the top options at pitcher.
Mm-hmm.
We got Bailey Ober at 9,200. We got Nick Pivetta at 8,500. We got Max Fried at 8,700. We got Bryce Miller at 8,900, Ryan Pepio, 8,200. They all project in the bat within 4 or so points of each other. Lineup construction is going to matter a lot today because you could play certain pitchers and spend up on bats. You could spend up on pitcher and pay down for some bats, depending on what teams you want to play. So out of that group of the top pitchers, we'll talk about the cheapo pitcher in a second. But out of the top pitchers, according to the bat projections and even the strikeout props, the 2 highest strikeout props on the board today are Ryan Pepio and Bryce Miller. In the same game, the Rays-Mariners game. That is the lowest total on the slate. Both the teams have the lowest total. Atlanta has the sort of lowest for Bailey Ober. Which one of these pitchers, I mean, if ownership wasn't an issue, James, out of that grouping of pitchers, which ones would you prefer to play? That's the first question. And secondly, are there any of these pitchers that you just would choose not to play at all? Are they all in conversation?
Yeah, I think they're all in conversation. It's hard for me to poke too many holes in them. The one that I would have less interest in would be Ryan Pepio. Just because I have him projected kind of the lowest of this bunch. I have Bryce Miller projected at the top, and then Max Fried, and then Bailey Ober, and then a couple points down is Ryan Pepio. I like Pepio. I think that he's good, but I think that Seattle has been overly punished and probably is being looked at as like an auto attack. And I think that that's not quite right. They do have some power, and they do have some guys that can punish pitchers. And Pepio, I like Pepio. He's good, but I think that he's been overproducing a little bit. So he's probably the one that I would fade out of this group. But if ownership is not being considered, I like all of them because it's not like any of them are overpriced. It would be a different thing if Ryan Pepio was 9,200, and then I'd be like, oh yeah, I don't want to play him. But he's 8,200, so it's like it's fine. It's a fine price. So if you're ignoring ownership, I'm fine with all of them.
Right. I think that the more popular ones will be Miller and Pepio.
Yeah.
But I don't think there'll be like a 40% owned pitcher.
Oh yeah,
today's
yeah.
Right. So it's not completely out of hand. I think if you didn't want to play Pepio or Miller, I mean, even if you didn't want to play either of them, I think that's perfectly fine. But you prefer Bryce Miller against Tampa Bay than you would Pepio in the reverse matchup. Even though the last start, I mean, obviously Bryce Miller didn't have a very good start last time, but that was against the Dodgers. But against most of the, bad teams, I mean, you see earlier in the season against the Angels, against the White Sox, right? Angels again, White Sox again. Like, he puts up pretty Detroit, 9 strikeouts. Much more willing to trust Bryce Miller against Tampa Bay. But both pitchers, in my opinion, also have like I don't know if they go 100 pitches. I mean, I think Max Fried is the one that's much more likely to go 100 pitches, but he probably has the worst matchup out of the bunch. I mean, the Braves aren't even favored in this game. So you have Fried and Ober. Assuming this game plays, the bat projects Fried higher than Ober, but Ober's strikeout prop is one higher. I mean, I'm not a big fan of attacking Atlanta either. I mean, Ober and Fried are both in play, but if they were half the ownership of Pepio and Miller, is that good enough for you to say that you'd rather play Fried or Ober?
Well, yeah, to be clear, I think that Bryce Miller is going to be 50% owned plus on this slate. And you said you think, you don't think either one's going to be 40%. I think that Bryce Miller is going to be 50% on this slate. And Ryan Pepio, I think, is going to be like 35. So definitely, I think with Fried and Ober, what I'm looking at is both of them being less than half the ownership of Miller, making them pretty solid plays. I'd be fine with either one of them. So that comes into the question of, before it was, okay, in a vacuum, do you like these guys? Outside of the vacuum, when we're looking at ownership, it's pretty hard for me to ignore Max Fried at what I think is likely going to be a third of the ownership of Bryce Miller. Not in near as good of a matchup and doesn't have as good of a game log for sure. But I just think that in larger fields, it's a really, really good decision to go with Max Fried instead. That being said, in small field, it's Bryce Miller, and it's not really even close. Bailey Ober, I'm gonna write him up for the newsletter. I haven't gotten around to my pitcher notes yet, but he looks like he's got some negative regression coming. I don't really like what I see in the recent sample. BABIP is way too low. Home run rates are way too low. So I have some concerns there for sure. I probably would be staying away from him, especially considering he's the most expensive pitcher on the slate.
Okay. Now on the bottom end, we got to talk about Ty Madden.
Yeah.
Okay. Never heard. I might as well be a creative player. I mean, look, I clicked his name. No game log. No nothing. Right. He's facing the White Sox. The Tigers against the White Sox. I never mind targeting the White Sox. I mean, his strikeout prop is 4.5 minus 165. So this isn't a situation where, like, the bat has his pitch count at 85. So this isn't a situation where it's like, oh, the guy's going to come in, pitch 3 innings, and be done. I mean, obviously, if he gets crushed, he's going to come out. But, like, this is a legitimate starting pitcher at 4K against a White Sox team that only has a 4.09 implied run total. I mean, if Ty Madden goes out and throws 5 innings and 5 strikeouts and only gives up 1 earned run, I mean, he's 4K. I mean, if you want to pay up for the Red Sox or the Rockies today or the Padres or something like that, you're gonna need Ty Madden. I mean, unless you're playing like 3 cheapy one-offs or something, which I'm not a big fan of doing. He's the key to unlocking anything you want stack wise in your lineup. And it's not like you can't get decent stacks even if you play a Pepio Miller lineup, just that you're gonna have to find the cheaper pieces of some of these stacks. But once you play Ty Madden, like, you could play all the Red Sox you want. You could pay up for the Rockies, who are very expensive on today's slate, right? So what are your thoughts on, I mean, the Ty Madden projects for only median wise 11 or 12 points, which is like not much better than Edward Cabrera and worse than Davis Martin or Kyle Gibson against San Diego, or just the same as Berrios against Boston. The thing is that all those other pitchers are like 7K, 8K. Ty Madden is 4K. So the likely outcome, I'm assuming, is that he goes out, gives up 4 earned runs, strikes out 4, and gives you 8 points or something like that, or 10 points. If you get the right stack, that may be fine. But I mean, with all the other pitching on the slate, I don't know. I mean, I just think between like Pepio, Miller, Fried, Ober, Pavetta, that you're probably getting most lineups are going to have 30 to 35 ish points, 35 maybe 40 points at pitcher. I'm not sure if Ty Madden has that upside, but it's hard for me to argue against a 4K pitcher with an 85 pitch count against Chicago, the White Sox.
If you just assume that he comes out and he's a league average starter, just league average baselines, he projects for 15, almost 16 fantasy points. If he's just league average, he projects as a lot of projection systems have him as like a swing guy. It's like an end of rotation guy, which I tend to agree with. But he's got a really deep pitch mix. He's got a fastball, slider, curveball, changeup, cutter. His command is okay. He has a little bit of velocity, even though there's not much movement on his fastball. So he's like a legit prospect. It's probably like the 5th best in Detroit's system right now. So I think that projecting him for 12 points is conservative. And at 4K, I don't know how you get away from him in small fields. Like if you're playing the 250, or I don't know what the small field contests are today. I haven't looked yet. But if you're playing one of the smaller field, like higher dollar contests, you're just locking in Ty Madden, Bryce Miller, and Miami, and just moving along, finding a leverage stack at your second spot, because there's just no reason to pass up a 4K pitcher that is gonna have a median of somewhere between 12 and 15, depending on what system you use. That's just egregious value.
Well, I mean, the ownership is something that you have to be concerned about. I mean, the bat only has him at like 17% owned.
Oh, that's way high. He's going to be way higher. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's it. But the thing is, with the guy like this, lineup construction is going to matter.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think the ownership is higher on Madden, that means the more expensive players, hitter-wise, are also going to be higher owned. Mm-hmm. If you think Madden's going to be lower owned, that means the cheaper hitters are going to be higher owned. See how one affects the other. This is, we're playing DFS here. It's about lineups, not players. So, the more owned that Madden is, the more owned the Rockies and the Red Sox are likely to be, because they're more expensive to play. The Marlins are probably chalky no matter what construction you play, because they're cheap for playing in cores. But really be aware of that. If you're gonna play like Ty Madden and then play like the Braves or the Padres or something, I think that is going to be a different combination. And then also, if you play like you don't play Madden and then you play like the Tigers as your stack and not the Marlins, like that will be a different way to go. But I do agree with you, James, that in smaller fields, I mean, I'll probably play Miller Madden if, like, I'm playing 3 lineups. I'm probably just playing that grouping of, like, I'll play 2 lineups with Madden, 1 lineup without, and then I'll rotate like Miller in one, Pepio in the other, or Max Fried in the other, and then one with like Fried plus Miller or something, and those will be my lineups, right? And then I get different at pitcher. At hitter. But are there any other pitchers that we have not mentioned that you think are at least playable in contests that you wouldn't be like, okay, I could see this guy doing well at low ownership? Are we kind of avoiding the Gibsons and the Berrioses and the Martins? I know we mentioned Pavetta. I think he's fine. But I mean, you're not playing like Randy Vasquez today or anything like that.
No, probably not. I think that you do have to, if you're looking at leverage points on this slate, I do think you have to consider Ryan Feltner in larger fields. I mean, outside of having an awful projection, that's not really the reason why you play him, right? Like the reason why you play him is you go with him and Bryce Miller and like a Rockies stack, and get away from Ty Madden and go up against the Miami chalk and just give yourself a whole lot of volatility. do that in like the largest fields. But really, I don't see any reason to get away from Madden, Pepia, Miller, Freed, and Ober. There's nobody that's really expensive. They're not barring you from anything. And if you go with Madden and Miller in small field, and like that's all that you really have to do. So I don't think you have to get that much different away from them.
Okay, but let's take a look at stacks now. These are 5-man stacks on DraftKings, A, B, C, D, and F. This is ownership adjusted, so the higher owned they are, the more they move down the list, and the lower owned they are, the more they move up the list. And obviously, you can play one-offs from any team, so don't worry. The team is in the F tier. You can still play a bat from them, but these are 5-man stacks on DraftKings. Let's start with the top. The Rockies and the Marlins. And in the bat, the Rockies actually project higher, significantly higher, 6 points as an average 5-man stack higher than the Marlins today. The difference is that I mean, if we take a look at this, I mean, like no one on the Rockies is cheap. I mean, they're not like absurdly expensive, but like there's no cheap pieces. If you want to play Jake Stallings at catcher, he's still 4,300 today, right? Jake Cave is 4,400. Michael Toglia is 5,300. Brenton Doyle is 6K on this slate, right? Then you look at the Marlins. The Marlins, yeah, Xavier Edwards, Jake Berger, stuff like. But I mean, once you start getting down to they're the road team, so I don't mind the bottom of the order. But Connor Norby is 3,700, right? Stowers and Lopez is 3,800, and then you got Griffin Conine at 2K in cores. I think he'll be pretty popular there. So it's much cheaper to play the Marlins than the Rockies, and they both have about the same implied run total. So, James, just due to ownership purposes, would you be upset if I put the Rockies in A and the Marlins in B, just because I think the Marlins are going to be way more owned than the Rockies, and they both project for about the same?
Yeah, I have Miami coming in with twice the aggregate ownership of the Rockies. I love how we just we're a week and a half away from NFL, and DraftKings pricing is just like, here's a 2K hitter in cores. Like, here's Connor Norby, 3,700. Just whatever. Just go crazy. Go have fun. Yeah, the Rockies. I don't have them projected with a 6-point difference. I do have them projected slightly better. I have them with a 19.2% chance scoring 8+ runs. I have Miami at 17.2 on the most recent run. So there's a little bit of difference there, but one way or another, the Rockies project better and are coming in at half the ownership. So especially when you consider Ty Madden, a very easy larger field lineup is just Ty Madden, Bryce Miller, and the Rockies. It's very simple. Or even Ty Madden, Ryan Pepio, and the Rockies, right? If you need a little bit more salary. So that seems right that the Rockies are A tier.
Another A tier team, I think, is the Red Sox. The Red Sox in the bat actually project a point higher than the Marlins. The Red Sox have almost a 5 implied run total in Fenway Park tonight. Facing Jose Berrios, that isn't like a bad pitcher. I don't think he's a great pitcher, and I don't think people are going to target the Red Sox as much. And it's quite hard to play the Red Sox as a stack without playing Ty Madden. And maybe this is a contrarian way of playing him, but I don't think the Red Sox are going to be nearly as owned. I don't think the Red Sox are going to be as owned as the Rockies today. And if they project close enough, are you okay with me putting the Red Sox in the A tier?
I am. Yeah. The reason, Berrios has really bad splits against lefties. His true average against lefties is about 284. His true average against righties is lower than that, but his weighted true average on this slate is third worst, above only Pivetta and Taillon, who Taillon I don't even think is on the slate, but Pivetta on that other side, he is also another person with really bad splits against lefties, 298 true average. So Berrios just not looking good overall, and there are really, really strong lefties on Boston, right? So they can take advantage of that. And then the kicker here, and the reason why I think Boston makes a lot of sense here and why they have such a high implied run total, Toronto's bullpen sucks. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people have been paying that much attention to. I look at bullpen stuff like every day. I mean, the Rockies have been the worst bullpen in the league for the entire year. They just don't even try. They just put like water boys out there. But Colorado's the worst by far. And then Kansas City is the second worst. The White Sox are the third worst, and Toronto is the fourth worst. And actually, Toronto over the last 25 games is allowing the highest expected slug rate from all of their relievers, worse than Colorado. So it's a good spot for Boston. They can get to Berrios, who has bad splits. They can get into a bad bullpen, and I think they make a lot of sense. And again, like you said, pricing isn't an issue here. So it's fine. I think they're a great A-tier stack, and they should come in even lower owned than the Rockies. So I'm into them. I think they're a great stack.
Okay, then we have this mid-tier. And the mid-tier is the Braves against Ober, the Tigers against Martin, the Padres against Gibson, and the Cardinals against Vasquez. Now, the Braves and the Padres are more expensive stacks. The Tigers are really cheap. Like, you can play the Tigers as much as you could play, better than probably more than the Marlins.
Yeah.
Where are you putting the Braves, the Tigers, the Padres, Cardinals?
Well, we'll start with the Tigers. I have Tigers with the second highest aggregate ownership on the slate right now. So I think we're probably going to have to put them in the C tier. They project okay, but I do think that maybe a little bit too much ownership. And then the rest of these guys, St. Louis, I'm never really into them. They just kind of are a mid team. San Diego, again, kind of a mid team. I think probably okay with both of them in the C tier. I would even be okay with putting San Diego in the D tier. I just don't think that I would, similar to what you say, I understand why some people would want to play them. I'm not going to. I wouldn't really consider them on the slate. And then the Braves, even though I think that Ober has some regression coming, they just are so low for me. They only have a 12.8% chance of scoring 8+ runs. I have them with an average score of 4.2 runs scored. Ownership is really, really low, but the bullpen that they're going up against is good too. I don't know. Where do you want to put the Braves?
I don't mind the Braves in the C tier. I mean, to me, I think there's a pretty big gap. Like, I think, I like the Red Sox, I like the Rockies, and obviously the Marlins are there, but they're going to be chalky. Outside of that, I think everything is C or down.
Yeah.
Right? I don't think that, if you think the Tigers are going to come in less owned than projected, I would bump the Tigers up to the B tier.
Sure.
Right? So, if anything, I would leave it like this. I would rather leave the Cardinals and the Braves in the C tier, but Detroit is really ownership dependent. If Detroit and Miami were both similarly owned, I'd rather play Miami because they project better, right? Mm-hmm. The Tigers are purely like a price play at their projection, but they don't project all that badly. So maybe I'm going to move the Tigers up to the B tier, and we keep all these other teams C or lower. And I'm not sure if I think that continues. Let's talk about the Blue Jays against Pivetta. I mean, do you want to play the Blue Jays on this slate? Are they a C or a D tier? I mean, I don't mind. I don't mind a Blue Jay. I'm more likely to play them as a one-off than a stack. But I also think that playing the White Sox against Ty Madden, I think that is definitely in play. And they project better than the three lowest teams on the slate. So if they start in the D tier, am I nuts for putting the Sox in the C tier and saying, if you think Ty Madden is going to be 40% owned today at 4K, the White Sox are a cheat. You can play the White Sox and then just pay up at pitching. I mean, the White Sox are dirt cheap.
Yeah. So I think that I'm fine with Toronto being in the D tier, but a caveat. I did mention that Nick Pivetta has really bad splits against lefties. I don't think that I want to stack against Pivetta because I don't think that the bullpen matchup is all that great. And there are other teams that I'd rather stack, but lefties for Toronto are in a really, really good spot here. And he is dealing with 5 of them. Granted, he has a 33% strikeout rate against lefties. It's really high, but he also has an 11% home run per plate appearance against lefties. He's either striking them out or he's giving up a home And in Fenway, that's a really good spot for lefties as well. So I think that there's a lot of reason to consider the lefties on Toronto as one-offs or as a secondary stack if you want to do 2 or 3 man from it. But I agree with them in the D tier as a larger stack. White Sox, totally fine with them in the C tier. You get a lot of leverage on them. I would even say also Seattle can go in the C tier, just because I think
Seattle? Because okay, I was going to put Seattle in the D tier.
I think they're borderline. I think they're borderline.
In the bat, James, the Mariners, the Rays, and the Twins all project about the same, and they're all about the same price, and they're kind of expensive for what they are. That like I could see playing the Mariners for leverage. I could see playing the Rays for leverage, and then we have I don't think Frieda's going to be owned enough that I'm putting the Twins in just on the very bottom.
Yeah, so similar to Detroit, I think Seattle is kind of hinging on Pepio's ownership. If we think that Pepio is going to come in at like 20 to 25% owned, I think they're a D tier team. If he's going to come in like 30 to 40% owned, I think they're a C tier team. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, but I know that Bryce Miller is going to be higher owned than Pepio.
Well, Bryce Miller is going to be like 60% owned.
I don't think they're going to be that high owned.
Dude, do we have another ownership bet?
What who are we betting on? Miller or Pepio?
Bryce Miller, 50+% owned.
It's good. This is going to be. I can't put this on because if the Braves Red Sox game doesn't play, if the Braves whatever game, the Twins game doesn't play, then you're going to win because you have Ober and Fried, and they're the ones that are going to be taking ownership away from these guys.
Yeah. Right? Well, so what's the weather say?
I mean, the weather says that the nasty line of storms moves through Minnesota tonight. I think the likely outcome is that they finish the game just prior to storm arrival. But as the storm line is moving a bit quicker than what models are showing, which is fully possible, we could see a game that ends slightly before a full 9 innings. Maybe they cancel the game together.
You're hedging. Okay, sure, fair. So if you don't want to take the bet, that's fine. But I do think that Miller is going to come in 50+% out, regardless of whether that game plays or not.
Okay, well, I think if the game doesn't play, then I would agree with you.
Oh yeah. If the game doesn't play, he's going to be like 65, like 60-65% owned.
I just think there's enough people over Pivetta, Fried, obviously Madden's taking some ownership. That I don't think any of this. I think if anyone's going to get out of hand, it's going to be Bryce Miller and not Ryan Pepio.
I agree with that.
So that's why my whole thing with the Mariners being like a high leverage stack is like. Sure. It's much more likely that Miller is so overowned that I'd rather play the Rays than the Mariners.
I'll agree with that.
If you're going to make that case, I'd rather bump the Rays up.
Yeah, sure. Let's put the Rays in the C tier then. Because I think one of them is a good leverage stack. I do think that Seattle is a better team than Tampa Bay. But I agree if there's not as much leverage, then it's Tampa Bay. So Look at us. We have the Sox and the Rays in the C tier. That's a fun one. This is a fun.
It's probably nothing that I'm going to play today. I mean, like in my lineups, I'm not playing the White Sox. I'm not playing the Rays at all. I'm probably in my 3 lineups. I'm going to play a Red Sox stack, a Rockies stack, and a Tigers stack. Like that's kind of and try to. I'll just avoid the Marlins and just hope they don't go off, and I'll take the leverage elsewhere, and just eat the chalk pitching kind of, and that's it.
Well, the fun thing about this slate, especially with how cheap the Marlins are, is that you could. I mean, I even think in larger fields, I think that you could go Pepio, Madden, Marlins, Tampa Bay. Even in a large field with a lot of the highest owned pieces, I think that Tampa Bay would give you enough leverage, even for large field, that you could play them with that, especially because Marlins are so cheap.
Just like if you don't play a Madden lineup, you could play a White Sox 2-man, 3-man.
Right.
I mean, you don't have to stack them, but like those guys are going to be just like nothing owned, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you could do, especially with how cheap the Sox are, right? You could do something like Miller, Pepio, White Sox secondary with a Marlins main, because I think that Madden is going to be like 40% owned. But people, I mean, we preach this all the time. Like, it's okay to eat a lot of ownership so long as you have appropriate leverage. It's why we talk all the time about contest sizes. and the differences in the way that you should play contests. I preach it up and down. Like, start with the chalk and then figure out where you need to leverage. Just eliminate weaker points and try to find as much leverage as you need. Larger contests need more leverage. Smaller ones, you don't. If you're playing something small, just start with Madden, Miller, and the Marlins, and then find a leverage spot that's good enough for a smaller field. And you don't got to worry that much about it.
Right. Look at the projection. Look at the ownership. You can do that in Lineup HQ here at RotoGrinders. Use our projections. We have projections for every sport. We have statistical projections for most sports, which you can use for props and pick them. So become a RotoGrinders combo premium member today. NFL starts soon. You'll get all of the stuff for NFL as well. So you get the MLB, NFL, NBA comes back in October. NHL comes back in October. PGA, MMA, college football. Hey, I forgot about college football. That's back. You get that as well. You get everything. Get $40 off your first month. Click on the link in the description to get that deal. James, you're at paydirtdfs.com, right?
I am, yeah. And I'm running a little promo as well through the start of week 1. Anybody who gets an NFL All Access year-long sub is going to be entered into a raffle to get a $333 cash prize or a Wildcat ticket for week 1, whichever one you want. So make sure you go do that. And if you're getting a sub, now is a great time to get it.
Okay, doke. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door. The thummy thumbs, you know, I like that, how much I like those. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. Grinders live later today, 5 p.m. Eastern, followed by Crunch Time at 6:15 or so. Make sure you tune in for all the last-minute updates, lineup news, Q&A, everything, and obviously Kevin Roth's weather updates leading up until lock. And I'll be back tomorrow. And also, programming note, from Wednesday through the following Monday, there'll be no show. I'm not dead. I was not fired. I'll be going away. So James, I will not be seeing you again until we review week 1 of NFL. Right, that's what we'll be doing on Mondays. Is reviewing because once NFL season comes around, that's all anyone wants to talk about is NFL. So from a programming note standpoint, for this show, it's pretty much all NFL except for Tuesdays. And Tuesdays will be either baseball or hockey or whatever. Then Monday will be a review of the previous, Sunday slate. Then Wednesdays, we'll take a first look at pricing for the next week. Thursday, we're just going to be looking all at props and pick 'em Thursday. Then Fridays are going to be GPP strategy for DFS. And that's kind of, and then Tuesdays is whatever's going on. And when hockey comes back, we'll do NHL. It'll be MLB during September, and that's kind of the NFL plans. So yeah, so I'll be back tomorrow, and then not back until the following Tuesday, and then it's NFL time, and then James, just like we do for baseball, since I'm not going to talk to you until we review week 1. Baseball, we made like 3 days into the season. We made the over under on the I said a week before All-Star game. That's when you're gonna say, like, when does the season end? I can't wait for NFL. Over under what week of NFL do you say? I can't wait for because you can't say I can't wait for baseball to come back because that may be a little late. But at what point in the NFL season do you just kind of start getting sick of NFL?
Week 11.
Over on week 11. Yeah, I was going to say week 12. I was going to say week 11, week 12.
It's somewhere between week 9 and week 12. It just depends on how hard I get kicked in the nuts by chalk for the first 9 weeks. Because if I don't have a single top 1% finish in the first 9 weeks, I'm toast. I'm done. Moving on to NBA. We're on to Oklahoma. But I think that hopefully I think there's actually going to be a lot of edge in NFL this year. I'm optimistic that I think that ownership is going to condense a lot more. We saw a little bit of that last year. I think we're going to see more of it. So I'm optimistic we make it to week 11.
Okay. I know in basketball, NBA, you get sick of NBA about 3 days in. Like that the over under is probably 3 or 4 days.
You and I didn't even make
the first time that some team scratches a player after lock or the injury report is complete falsehoods, that's about 4 days into the season. And
bro, like, you and I didn't even make it through December last year.
No, right. So,
we usually make it until like the 3rd week of January.
Right.
We didn't even make it to the end of December last year, man. I'm hoping for a little bit better than that.
It's not going to be better. I guarantee you, it's not going to be better.
No, it probably won't. It's probably going to be worse, actually. Do you think we're going to make it to like the 2nd week of December, and then there's going to be 4 late scratches for no reason, and the team is going to have like a leak in their roof, and it's just going to be total chaos, and I'm going to be completely done. I'm going to be like, I'm not dealing with this.
I pre-planned for that. I just choose not to even do it at all. I just said I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. NBA stuff. I'm just done with.
Yeah.
Just done with. But I'm not done with you guys. Hit that thumbs up button on your way out the door, and I'll see you tomorrow. But remember, after tomorrow, I won't be back until the next Tuesday. So I want 17 DMs asking them if I'm dead or if I'm fired, because that typically happens after about 1 or 2 days. I'm gone. So be aware of that. So I'll be back tomorrow talking about all things you're thinking about. Daily fantasy props and pick 'em on RotoGrinders Today.